Chapter 1. 6 young children, ages ranging from 8 to 2, sat in front of an old wooden chair. Their young faces lit with joy and excitement as the old woman sat in the chair. This was a typical scene on a cold winter's night at a grandmother's house. But tonight was different, for the old woman had a different story for the children. A story as real as it was fake. A story worn by the hands of time. "Good evening, children," the woman began. "Now listen, for I shall tell this story only once. Long ago, in a town without a name, a young girl was just reaching her time of adulthood. This girl was named Mariana. But you see, Mariana was different from the other girls. She cared not for the coming of adulthood or the stresses that came with it. Mariana was a tomboy at heart. She loved to play in the mud on rainy days and help in the pasture on sunny ones. She helped tend the horses and pick the vegetables during the harvest. But most of all, she loved to frighten the other girls. It had become apparent for the girl that she was even more different than the others were, when a box arrived for her in the post. A box that held the answers to unknown questions, the key to her understanding that would unveil the frightening difference that scared the wits out of the other girls. The box had come on a particularly rainy day, a source of excitement for her and her siblings on a day that they normally just sat cursing the horrid weather and hoping for at least a single ray of sunlight. The whole house was wired with excitement and tension as Mariana's adopted siblings climbed over each other to try and read the name on the box. A collective groan of disappointment rang through the room as one child after another realized their name wasn't scrawled across the top in an unfamiliar handwriting. "Mary, it's for you!" one of her little brothers exclaimed, pushing the other children out of the way as he waddled through, half carrying, half dragging the much larger box to her. She smiled at him. "Thank you, James," she said, ruffling the younger boy's hair. After a moment of looking over the box, she gave in to the urging of her siblings to open it. She tore away the layers of tape and a row of cardboard staples, before finally opening the box. She looked inside, knowing that her siblings watched, looking at her with curious eyes. She said nothing about what was in the large box, just closed it and carried it to her room, leaving her siblings to wonder as she left the room without a word. The old woman paused, a smirk lighting her wrinkled face. The children looked at her, waiting to hear more. "That's enough for tonight. It's already past your bedtime," she said to the chorus of whines and protests. "You will have to wait until morning." Lougaroo, Chapter 2. The old woman sat in her chair in front of the 6 children once more, ready to begin her tale of Mariana and the mysterious box. She seemed as excited as the children now, her eyes alight with remembrance as she begins the story without hesitation. Mariana now sat in her room, holding the 2 small objects in her hand. Who would send such small things in such a large box, she thought as she turned them over in her hands. A ring and a necklace, each bearing an L insignia on the large jewels set into the metal. On the back of the necklace and the band of the ring read a single inscription: "You are the chosen." "Chosen for what?" she muttered, slipping the ring on her finger to try it on. Perfect fit. How odd," she said softly, trying to take the ring off again. But the band seemed to tighten round her finger, refusing to come loose. She sighs and gives up, trying to remove it. It was a pretty ring after all, as was the necklace. She picked the necklace back up and wondered if it would be the same if she put it back on. Would it be impossible to remove again? Curious as ever, she did, clasping the gold-colored chain around her neck. She waited a couple moments before reaching back to unclasp it. But she couldn't find the clasp. She felt along the chain, thinking maybe it had slipped down as most clasps did. But it hadn't. There just wasn't a clasp anymore. Then there was a knock on the door, and she jumped, hitting her head against the headboard. She winced, rubbing the already forming bump on her head, and got up, going to the door to open it after slipping the necklace under her shirt. James was standing there, smiling the smile that he almost always wore. "Why did you leave like that, Mary? Everyone's dying to know what was in the box." "I really want to know, too," he said. "But you don't have to tell me if you don't want to." She looked at him before stepping aside to let him in. She shut the door behind him, locking it, before going to sit on her bed, patting the space beside him for him to sit. "I'll tell you, but you can't tell anyone else, okay?" she asked the younger boy as she sat. "I promise I won't tell anyone, Mary," he said, crossing his heart. She smiled at him before pulling the necklace out from under her shirt collar. "I got this and this. I thought it was very strange. The only other thing in the box was rocks," she told him, showing him the ring. He looked at her in surprise, reaching out to touch the necklace before jerking his hand back. "Ow! It shocked me," he exclaimed, and it was her turn to be surprised. "I'm sorry," she said, dropping the necklace back under her shirt. The fact that it had shocked him made her curious. Normally it would have shocked her too, if it had been static electricity. But that was not the case. "I'm going to take a nap. Why don't you play with the others, James?" she added, and got up, ushering him out of the room before looking at the necklace. Why had it shocked him? Was it some sort of protection device? Machinery disguised as jewelry? The old woman sighed softly, yawning, and looking at the children. She grinned at them with a grin that spoke of suspense and mystery. It was a grin that the children would hate to see for the rest of their lives. It meant story time was over for the night. "Time for bed. Rest your head. You'll hear more of the story another night," she said, gazing at the fire with eyes that seemed distant, still lost in the story. Lougaroo, Chapter 3. For the third night, the old woman sat in the chair. The children piled themselves around her as she smiled, opening her mouth to begin the story as she gazed into the white-orange flames burning in the fireplace. The ring and the necklace proved to be more trouble than Mariana first thought, for the necklace would warm up when someone she disliked was around, and the ring would chill to freezing temperatures just before a fight would break out between two or more of her siblings. With each new power, the two pieces of jewelry began to show, the more frantic Mariana became in trying to remove them. Her mind would whirl through the different theories of the witchcraft the ring and the necklace possessed. For 3 nights she obsessed over them, going from weighing the pros and cons of having the jewelry to trying to pry them off. But nothing she did or thought could remove them, because she was the chosen one. On the 4th night, they came for her, those who had deemed her the chosen. "Who are you?" she cried, trying to loosen the ropes binding her wrists to no avail. "We are the Lougaroo. We are your family, your brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers. We plan no harm for you, so do not fear, Mariana of the Redwood clan," said a tall man with silvery blue eyes. "What do you mean? I have brothers and sisters and my adopted parents." "Take me back. I don't know you," Mariana shouted. "We cannot. You are one of us. You know it. You must. For your Lougaroo traits have started to reveal themselves," he said to her, cutting the ropes binding her wrists. "Oh, of you? Okay, listen. I have no idea who you are or what is going on, but I'm telling you, you've got the wrong girl," she cried, trying to back away, only to bump into another one of her captors. "Mariana, it is you who we are looking for. If you are not our Mariana, then you wouldn't have been able to pick up the ring and the necklace. They would have shocked or burned you," he said, looking frustrated. "Then what do you want from me? What does it mean to be chosen?" she asked, trying to keep calm in such a terrifying situation. The man laughed softly, grasping her wrist and dragging her toward this building they had parked in front of. "I'm going to start this all from the beginning. Then I'll answer your questions," he said, shoving her inside the old building and leading her toward a well-lit living room, where two other girls and 3 younger boys were already sitting. looking less frightened than she was. "Who are you?" she asked. "They are all chosens. Now listen, everyone. My name is Micah. I am the same as you. I, too, was in the same position as you once were. Now I understand in full what it means to be chosen. You are all children of the Lougaroo, shapeshifters. I will be your teacher, your guardian, and your best friend, or your worst enemy. There are for you others who will look to you for guidance. There are Justin and Jason. Jason, unfortunately, could not be with us today, but Justin is here. He'll be by in a moment to take you to your rooms and roommates. Now I'd like you to take turns saying your names so you can learn who each other are. Not all of you are biological siblings, but we will always be your brothers and sisters regardless of the blood that runs in your veins. Now go." The man, Micah, said, waving his hand at the oldest boy. "I'm Michael June," he muttered, looking less than thrilled to be here. "I'm Sapphire Jassy," the girl next to him said, her voice shrill and nails on the chalkboard sounding. "I am Timothy," the youngest boy murmured, smiling brightly at Mariana. "I'm Lysander Reich," the last boy said in a soft and shy voice. "I'm Mally-Ann," the oldest girl said, smiling gently. "Good. All right. Justin, you can take— Oh, Jason, when'd you get in?" Micah asked, drawing attention to the tall, blonde-haired man with gold and black eyes. He looked up, gazing straight at Mariana as he spoke. "A bit ago. Not long," he said, and Mariana looked away, feeling both threatened and intrigued. "You have to wait until the next night to hear more. Now it's bedtime, children," the old woman said. "But grandmother, who is Jason? Isn't that grandfather's—" one of the elder children began, only to be cut off by the old woman. "You'll have to wait and see." Lougaroo, Chapter 4. On the fourth night, the children were abuzz with theories and questions as the old woman plopped herself down in her chair. She ignored each of their questions and shushed them in order to begin the next part of the story of Mariana and the Lougaroo. As promised, Justin had taken everyone to their rooms. Mariana didn't seem to have a roommate, but if she did, they weren't there now. So she was able to lay on her bed in silence, thinking, Jason. Who was Jason to her? Why was he so frightening but so interesting at the same time? Why couldn't she stop thinking about him? She thought before sitting up and brushing her hair from her face. She needed to stop thinking of him. He was the least of her worries. Now she had to figure out if she wanted to stay or run. They really hadn't shown any motive to harming her, aside from binding her and tossing her blindfolded into the back of a car. A knock sounded at her door, and she got up, going to it. "Hey, Mariana, right? It's Sapphire and Lysander. We heard you didn't have a roommate and thought you could use some company," Sapphire said, smiling at Mariana, who hesitantly smiled back. Lysander just waved shyly before Mariana stepped aside to let them in. "Yeah, it's Mariana, but you can call me Mary, Anna, Anne, or Mare," she said as they went and sat down on the empty bed. "So, who were you before this? Before the Lougaroo came for you?" Lysander asked. "I was a farm girl," Mariana said, not really knowing who she was, taken aback by the question. "A farm girl? Like tending animals and plowing fields?" Sapphire asked, looking interested in hearing Mary's story. "Well, I didn't plow fields, but I did help with the harvest and fed the animals. I used to love canning, too," Mariana said, looking thoughtful, trying to remember who she really was. "Wow, so you never wore dresses or played with dolls or wore makeup?" Lucinda asked, seeming to have the attributes of a city boy. "No dolls, and dresses hindered harvests. Makeup would have been sweated all away under the sun," I told him, smiling softly. "What about you guys? Who were you before the Lougaroo?" I asked. These could be my friends. I'd finally have friends. I was assistant to a lawyer. I never went anywhere but the city and had to handle paperwork. My parents never seemed to care about it. letting me be out until midnight without bothering to call to find out where I was. Now, now I know why. It was because I wasn't really their son. I was just some kid they took in, Lysander said, his eyes somewhat sad. Sapphire patted his shoulder. I was an adoptive daughter of a very rich family. I had whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. I had the perfect life. Then the necklace and bracelet came in the mail, and well, my perfect life fell apart, Sapphire said. You got a necklace and a bracelet? I got a ring and an armband, Lysander said, pushing up his sleeve to show the armband around his upper arm, resting over a dragon tattoo. I got a ring and a necklace. Maybe it has to do with families. We can't all be related. So maybe Sapphire, you're from one family, Lysander, you're from another, and I'm from yet another, Mariana said, trying to think it through. You think too much. They'll probably tell us when class starts, Sapphire said with a laugh. Yeah, I guess you're right, Mariana said, but her mind still wondered and questioned, falling every now and again on the thoughts of Jason. Jason, who both terrified and called to her. Jason, who probably knew more about her than she knew of him. The children knew when the old woman had finished the story for the day, looking at the clock and sighing. As they were ushered off to bed, the old woman looked into the fire. It reflected in her eyes that seemed saddened as well as excited by the story. Eyes that seemed young in her wrinkled face. Lougaroo, Chapter 5. Grandmother, how much longer is the story? Summer's almost over, the oldest of the boys asks. The woman laughs, smiling softly, sounding young and happy. On the night your grandfather, and to some of you great-grandfather, return, she said, looking at the smallest child. When the moon is at its fullest, I will have finished this story, and you will know why I have drawn the telling of it out. She finishes, grinning almost as though she was a child herself, before beginning the next part of the story that she seemed more than excited to tell. Mariana, as I have said, was a girl who despised the very idea of dresses, but in a dress they put her. Every female seemed to have been forced into a dress of floral patterns and a wide, many-layered skirt for the so-called classes. The boys forced into smoothly pressed slacks and silk dress shirts. She muttered to herself as she followed the crowd of older girls toward what they referred to as the field. Sapphire and Lysander followed close to her, along with a few younger boys that Justin had brought later in the night, none of which seemed to be her absent roommate, who had yet to show his or herself. Not that she believed she had one, but if she did, they obviously had no belongings and made their bed beautifully. Mariana! Hey, Mariana! The sender said, waving a hand in front of her face. She shook her head, clearing her mind of her distant thoughts. What? She asked, pushing her hand out of her face. Fire was just trying to talk to you. Didn't you hear her? He asked, looking at her worriedly. No, sorry, I was kind of dazed. What were you saying, Saph? She asked, looking at the other girl. Sapphire smiled softly. I was asking if you noticed that you-know-who with a name that starts with a J was looking at you, she repeated. Mariana shook her head, looking up and right at Jason, who stood at the end of the hall. As soon as he noticed that she was looking, he stalked toward her, the other children flowing around him as though he was a stone against the flow of a river. He came right up to her as she stood her ground, her mind wanting her to both cower and show her fearlessness. Once he got close, he reached toward her, and she flinched, expecting some sort of show of violence or reprisal. But he did neither, simply fixing the bow in her hair without a word before returning to his post at the end of the hall. What was that all about? Mariana asked, eyes wide with surprise and shock. Who knows? Maybe he likes you, Sapphire teased, elbowing her jokingly in the side before continuing down the hallway. Mariana followed after her, more distant than before. The group of friends got to class and sat next to each other. Mariana listened to them as distantly as they spoke to each other. But then class began. The teacher stepped to the front, and his very presence demanding attention. His eyes, a leopard gold that the friends could see from the place near the back of the classroom. I am Micah McLean. You can call me Micah or Mr. McLean or just McLean, But you may not call me Mike, Clane, or McMicah. Those who call me by those names, or any other abbreviation, will be kicked out and dismissed from my class for the remainder of the year. Do I make myself clear?" he asked. And all the students all nodded, looking somewhat terrified. The old woman paused, soft-colored eyes flickering in the light of the fire as her voice fell silent. The children remained quiet for a moment or so, before they broke out into questions. "Why did Jason fix Mariana's bow?" the oldest child asked, raising her hand. "How do you know the story?" one of the smaller children asked. "Shush," was the old woman's only response, before ushering them off to bed for the night. Lougaroo, number 6. The old woman gazed distantly out the window as she waited for the children to get settled, mind seeming to wander as she watched the clouds moving in front of the soft glow of the half-moon. Then she shook her head as though she was shaking away her thoughts, and looked down at the children with a bright smile. None of them said a word. Listening quietly, she began the next piece of the story that would soon draw to a close with the ending of winter. Time passed quickly now for the friends. It was as though they'd fallen into a routine, simply picking up where their old lives had left off. It was 4 months and 6 days later that Mariana would meet her roommate, someone she'd already known. "James!" she exclaimed, startled to find her young, adopted brother sitting on a bed adjacent to hers, with his little suitcase. He smiled slightly at her and got up, giving her a hug. "I was chosen too, Mary," he said softly. She hugged him back silently, looking at his things already thrown about as they had been in their room back home, though she supposed it couldn't be referred to home any more. Not that she cared. She'd always see the farm as her home. "I'm glad you're here, James. I needed a bit of normality. I feel so lost," she said, after a long bout of comfortable silence. "I'm glad to be here, too. Is it true that Mr. Jason likes you? One of the other guys, Mr. Justin, I think, was talking about it to Mr. Micah. He said that Mr. Jason doesn't stop talking and thinking about you," James said. "The wonderful things that an 8-year-old can tell you," Mariana thought as she looked at the boy. "I believe she does," she replied. "I believe now," she added mentally as she ruffled the boy's hair. "All right. You're going to want to get some rest, James. Mr. Micah will wear you out if you don't." "Okay, see you in the morning," James said, hugging her one last time before moving to his bed. Mariana followed suit, going to her own bed and settling down. But she didn't fall asleep. Not yet, anyway. She was thinking of Mr. Jason, as well as the fact that her birthday was tomorrow and would probably go unnoticed. Or so she thought. The next morning, Mariana got up and woke James, who grumbled sleepily and put on the uniform that was in his side of the closet. A knock on the door startled them both and made James squeak in surprise. Mariana went to the door and opened it, finding a present perched on the doormat. After staring at it for a good minute, she picked it up and opened it. As usual, the curious James came trotting over to her side as she dropped it on her bed and tore the tape that held an envelope to the side. "What is it, Mary? What's in the box?" James asked impatiently. Mariana said nothing, ignoring the boy as she opened the envelope and read the letter. The letter read, "Dear Mariana, I know it's your birthday and figured you'd want it acknowledged. I don't understand you and find you odd, but not in a bad way. Anyway, I got you this. I hope you like it. Sincerely, Jason. P.S. I'm sorry I freaked you out the other day. Your bow was crooked." Smooth, Jason, smooth, Mariana thought to herself as she laid the letter down and began to tear away the red wrapping paper and opened up the box. Inside the box lay a red silk dress that was covered in black jewels and long, detachable sleeves. Another note lay in the midst of the silk. It read, "There will be a dance on the full moon. It's the Lougaroo's night of festival. Would you go with me? If yes, stop me today. I'll be standing guard in the hall again. If no, ignore me. But you can still keep the dress. And other things, either way." Mariana smiled slightly, lifting the dress out of the box. Beneath the box lay a pair of ruby earrings that matched a pearl and ruby necklace that sat in one side of the pair of white heels. "Wow, Mary," James said. The old woman paused as the grandfather clock chimed 12 times, midnight. Story time was over, but all remained, sitting still in front of her. The silence was deafening as each child pictured the dress and let the details of the story sink in, even as the fire dimmed, dying before their eyes. Lougaroo, Chapter 7. Grandmother, are you okay? One of the children asked as the old woman sits in the creaky old rocking chair. She looked tired and older, as though she had been aged by the story itself. She touched her forehead, her eyes soft and gentle, hazy and foreboding. It's nothing, child. Now quiet, so I may begin this story, she replies, drinking from the glass of water on the table beside her chair, before beginning the next installment of the story the children begged to hear more of every night. Mariana walked down the hall in the stupid floral dress that served as her uniform, keeping her eyes open for Jason as she clutched a now wrinkled piece of paper in her hand. A piece of paper that held the simple word yes, written in a red and messy scrawl, only a nervous teen would have produced. When she spotted him, she walked toward him, her eyes focused on his appearance, noting that his lack of anger and viciousness made him look closer to his real age. As she passed him, she handed him the one simple one-word note and kept walking. She was blushing, and knew he could tell, and the thought embarrassed her more than she already was. For the next 2 days before the full moon, Mariana rarely saw Jason. In fact, she rarely saw any of the staff that controlled the river of Lougaroo children as they walked the halls, varying in age and strength. She supposed it was all for the full moon dance, and continued on from class to class, ignoring troublemakers. On the night of the full moon, everyone put on their finest outfits and began the walk out to the courtyard that looked completely different, bathed in lights and streams, and holding tables filled with foods and drinks. It was like a modern-day prom, much to the Lougaroo children's delight. The moment Mariana, dressed in the dress and accessories Jason had given her, stepped onto the dance floor, she was met by Jason, who was pressed into a lovely suit that made him look uncomfortable and grown up. I didn't think you'd really say yes, he said, scratching the back of his neck with a sheepish smile painted on his face. But I'm glad you did. I normally don't come to these things, so you'll have to forgive my shyness of the matter, he added as he took her hand and pulled her toward the center of the dance floor as a slow song began to drip from the speakers around the room. He took one of her hands in his and placed the other at the small of her back, careful not to let it stray too low as he began to lead her. You don't seem too shy to me. Just a little rusty, she said, wincing slightly when he stomped on her toes. Sorry, he said automatically. She found that she liked this new side of Jason, that she preferred this charmingly awkward man over the harsh and grumpy one who normally guarded the halls like a forsaken gargoyle, that watched everyone's move with complete accuracy. The old woman cuts off as the door opened and an old man stepped inside, holding a box filled with something metallic that made low, ringing and tinkling sounds as they skidded against each other in the cardboard box. Mary, story time is over. The full moon has come. They need to know, now, the man said, setting the box beside the old woman who let out a hefty sigh. I wanted them to hear the full story before we told them, Jace. But, if you insist, she says, then turns to the children with eyes that almost glimmered in excitement as she opened the box and pulled out a handful of necklaces. Children, you are the chosen, she says, grinning with more excitement than any of the children had ever seen her express. The room fell silent, and it was as though all things had stopped. The words still seemed to ring heavily in the air around the children who sat in attendance. You are the chosen. Lougaroo, Chapter 8. The old woman's grin was bright as she gazed down at the children, the necklaces in her palms sparkling brightly. Mariana, Jace, and Jason stood before the children, their features aged by time, but their spirits had the same mischievousness of their youth. As the children all tried to speak at once, their responses garbled into one sound. Relax, all of you. Sheesh. You're making my hearing aids ring, Jason scolded, putting an arm around Mariana's waist. Let your grandmother speak before you begin to protest and question, he growled, the same grumpy man they knew. Now I'm sure you all are confused, but I wanted you to know what it was like for us, to know it was something to be afraid of. You are chosen as we were. Your great-uncle James is a teacher, as Jason once was. So you'll see him too. You'll even see us at times, Mariana said, softly smiling. But I thought it was just a story. It has to be fiction, the eldest grandchild's grandson demands, standing up. Jason sighs and brushed back a lock of graying hair that had fallen across his face. It isn't fiction, Kristoff. None of it was. Now take your necklace. You'll all get one, and a bracelet too. You have a better trip there, unlike your grandmother. We'll take you there, Jason says, digging the bracelets out of the box as the eldest boy stepped up and took the necklace and the bracelet. If you don't believe them, brother, put the necklace on and try to take it off, the youngest granddaughter says, taking hers without another word. The boy gets angry, taking his. Just shut up, Becca, he says, putting it on and crossing his arms. His face lit with childish anger. Becca sticks her tongue out at her brother. Now, don't fight. The story can be continued on the way to the school of Lougaroo, Mariana says, flashing a smile as the children put on their necklaces and were handed the thin bracelets. Really? 'Cause I want to hear the rest, the youngest child said, smiling softly. Yes, really, Jason says, ushering the child out the door, as Mariana put out the fire in the fireplace. Her voice rang out as she snuffed out the memory-filled flame. Heed these words, for the end of the story will signal the end of your normal life and the beginning of greatness. Mariana smiled as she danced with Jason, her eyes glowing from the lights that surrounded the dance floor and ran in wires along the floor. But then the song ended and her smile faded when Jason pulled away to help with a problem. She let him go and sighed softly. Hey, Mary, James called from beside the table spread with food and drink of all sorts and cultures. Mariana trudged over to him, nearly tripping over a string of lights. Hey, Jamie, made any friends yet? She asked him, smiling at her once brother. Not really. Everyone's older than me, he said, pouting. I know how you feel. I feel so small. Everyone is tall here, Mariana said with a laugh. Like Mr. Jason? He's almost a foot taller than you, he said, and giggled. No, he's not, Mariana said, blushing ever so slightly. All right, 6 inches, he teased, elbowing her. Oh, shush, you. Now go socialize, she told him, pushing him toward the dance floor. The old woman cut off with a smile, her eyes dim in the dark of the night. The children gazed at her. If I keep speaking, we'll never make it before dawn. Shoo, get to the wagon and get on. I'll be there in a moment. There is something I've forgotten, she says, and turns back for the house. I never finished the story, and let me know in the comments if you want me to write the ending, because I loved writing this story, but because I didn't think anyone liked it, I stopped writing it. So please, let me know. I love this story, and I always have, but sometimes inspiration is hard to reach for when you have no one there to inspire you. So please, just let me know, because you're my fans, and you mean the world to me, even if you don't usually say anything. A view means everything, even if you don't comment, or even if you don't even like it. It's your views that count, and I want to know your opinion. Let me hear what you want to say and what you mean. And I love all of you, and I'm glad that you stuck here with me as you have. Even if you're just starting now, please don't go. Stay and give us a chance. Please.